the idea of Society 4.0 is that at the core of this new revolution, and remember there have been at least 3 other revolutions, and at each phase of these revolutions, there's always that fear that human beings would be displaced, right? That other things would take over. And so what Society 4.0 is trying to do is to place the human at the center. So the debate is not whether jobs will be lost, because there are certain jobs that will certainly be lost. And research currently shows that most of the jobs that will be taken over by, robotics and other aspects, and this is still debatable, and we don't know where we're going. But what research shows is that a lot of the physical labor, all right, might be taken over by that. But what it also suggests is that jobs as we think of them now, or as we understand them now, might change, all right? So what might be considered a job 20 years from now is not necessarily what we consider it at this point in time. We don't know what it will look like ideally or eventually, but what we know is that the human being will still or should still be at the center of this, even as what we perceive as jobs transform and change and evolve. Okay, I'm going to allow my panelists to go on, and maybe I'll come back later. But you raise a few important points, and these are points that have been raised in academia. Are we emphasizing this idea of AI, of robotics, of automation too much at the expense of the human being? And in a context such as ours in South Africa, where we are struggling with employment, what role does it play, and how can we sort of engage with it in that context?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the 5G, so actually where I work at the Tshimologong precinct, which is associated to WITS, so I work with WITS University, there is a 5G aerial that was just put up last week. But I think one of the issues with 5G, however, is that, like you're saying, it's the short wave, so you have to have a lot more stations, basically, aerials. So you have to have a lot more of them, which is a lot more expensive. And the other thing is that nobody really knows the physical impact of those waves, like you were saying, on the body. And I think actually last week at Tshimologong, when everyone put that up, everybody was like, should we be coming into work? Will we be dying early? You know, like what's happening here? And I think these are some of the things that are really quite serious. And even while I think that aerial's been put up by the Chinese company, and it's also very important for us to, in the 4IR, and I think it's also important to understand the sort of unpacking of 4IR, like you were saying earlier. Like, fourth industrial revolution is just an extension of the third industrial revolution, and it's also just an extension of computing. So it's where computing that already exists begins to do other things, and you add data, and you add Wi-Fi, and you add connectivity to that, essentially. And I think the bigger threat than 4IR itself is actually this is kind of political, but the threat of the kind of neo-colonial position around that, and how stronger, more advanced, with more resource countries might be using South Africa and Africa as testing grounds for various other things, and also as a marketplace to kind of buy, sell, get data, etc., etc. And it's about taking those reins in our own hands, really, rather than just saying like we have to deny it completely because we've got other issues to solve, which we do. We have issues with pit toilets and textbooks and all kinds of things that need to be solved. But at the same time, you can't just let it go. You have to understand it, and you have to keep pace, and so that you can protect yourself wherever it is that you need to, essentially.